You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots.
On this episode of Engage, a Mother's Day special, with special guests Alison Britton, Pilot Family Matters Committee Chair and mother of two, Carrie Nickell, Pilot Family Matters Committee member and mother of two, and Cassie Nelson, First Officer and mother of three. Here's your host, Ryan Argenta.
This is the Engage podcast Mother's Day special. I'm here with Alison Britton, Carrie Nickell, and Cassie Nelson. Thanks for being here, and I'd like to be the first to wish you a happy Mother's Day.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thanks for having us, Ryan.
You bet.
Thank you.
So I want to discuss having a pilot career while being a mother. We're going to get into maternity leave and some of the benefits we need to support you as mothers and as pilots. And guys, before you fast forward or before you hang up the podcast, this affects everyone. And the Pilot Family Matters Committee isn't just about maternity leave or other things. There's a broad range of benefits. And I want to kick it off with Alison. What does PFMC, the Pilot Family Matters Committee, what do they do for Delta pilots? And how do they advocate for pilot mothers?
PFMC was started in 2017. The MEC approved the standalone committee. The committee itself, the majority of it is web-based. So most of our content is on our webpage. We cover 22 subject matters. So anything from adoption, paternity, maternity, divorce, caring for an ill family member, caring for a family member with mental health issues. We do state sick, state paid family leave. So we have a huge, broad variety of subject matters that we cover. And we also have volunteers that have special experience in those subject matter areas. So if you have any questions that might not be on the webpage or your particular circumstances that might need some clarification, those volunteers are available to you to ask questions or reach out to us. And particularly with mothers with our maternity, we do have a maternity mentoring program. So if a pilot reaches out to us, we are able to walk them through the beginning stages of maternity, what to expect after they have a child, what to expect, and then coming back and returning to work and pumping and those challenges and walk them through that whole process. A couple of other things that we're doing in advocacy is working with the company and getting lactation rooms that are in our chief pilot offices and also more locations in our headquarters where simulators are, which is a big thing because there's nothing close there. They have them in HQ, but they're not close to simulators or briefing rooms. So obviously, that's something that we also want to work on improvements too.
That's great. So that is a broad range of things that you touch on. If I'm a male pilot, could I call Pilot Family Matters and ask a question about maternity leave or paternity leave?
Absolutely. We help a lot of pilots in their particular situation or circumstances. I even have pilots who'll reach out to me where they're both pilots for Delta. I'll tell you, Ryan, that I get calls almost every day when it comes to paternity and guys looking for time off. And the biggest thing that I've seen is they're like, well, I want time off before the due date because they want to be able to be there. Obviously, they don't want to be in the middle of a trip and their wife calls them and says, I'm going into labor, and they're halfway across the Atlantic. That's definitely not ideal. So some other things to think about when it comes to our pilots who are not actually delivering babies, but still need to be there to support. And it goes full circle, I think, is the whole family unit.
And then you brought up state sick, which applies to certain bases, certain states, but
Right.
it is pretty prevalent. And there are a lot of questions about state sick that come up. Pilot Family Matters would be a place to go.
Absolutely, yeah.
You can reach out to Pilot Family Matters. What's the best way to do that, Alison?
On our webpage, so go to dal.alpa.org, go under committees, Pilot Family Matters. You can also submit a DART inquiry if you have any questions about a particular situation that you're going through. And we're happy to help.
So we're talking about maternity leave. You mentioned that's a bulk of what PFMC works with. You work with the company hand in hand. Why is maternity leave an important issue for all pilots, male, female, non-binary? Why is this important to everybody?
That's a really great question because sometimes we maybe focus on, well, that doesn't affect me. I have always believed that when we put value on family and raising that next generation that's coming into this world that's going to be a part of our society, we're all going to be better off. And our family dynamic for everybody is vastly different, whether you're biologically different and having children and bearing children, or you're going through infertility, or you're going through adoption, or if you're having elder care. All of those things that associate with family need to have value on them. And so maternity is that starting point, is putting value on that family, and that in turn is a ripple effect that will affect every single pilot, no matter what your family dynamic is or what your needs and wants are when it comes to contract negotiations. It literally will affect all of us, and if we all stand in unity, then we're all going to be successful with it and having the things that we want.
You're good. You hit the nail on the head, because I want to work for a company that values the individual employee. They value the employee groups as a whole. And Delta is one that outwardly and publicly faces, they say, we want diversity. We want women in the workplace. We want to support all these diverse groups, and we want those cultures as part of Delta. And so do I, frankly, and so do we as a group. And as a pilot group, we want to bring in the best possible colleagues that we can. And you do so by attracting great quality humans through great quality programs. Maternity leave would be one of them. And you're right, it does trickle into other aspects aside from maternity leave. It'll trickle into vacation. It'll trickle into time off, quality of life, the things that we're negotiating in Section 6 right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So one thing I understand from a distance, that the airline industry as a whole, but in particularly Delta's maternity leave benefits, their program and policy, it lags the airline industry, but it severely lags its corporate peers. And in some cases, even like the federal government has better maternity leave than what we have. What's the current setup for maternity leave, Alison Britton?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really complicated, which is why we offer that maternity mentoring program, because it is so complex. And I usually like to break it down in 3 separate sections just for simplicity purposes. So you touched on a little bit, which is the paid section of that maternity leave. The second would be insurance coverage, and then the third in allowed time off. So the first is the compensation that I usually talk about. So if a pilot comes and she's pregnant, and she says, "Hey, I'm pregnant. I don't know what to do now," or "What are my options?" The first thing is, okay, you can go out at any point in time. You can stop flying if you're no longer fit to do so. And then your sick allotment would come in, your vacation, if you choose to use that, would come in for pay. Then it goes into a series of disability benefits. And all of that pay ends at 6 weeks post-birth if it's a vaginal delivery, or 8 weeks post-birth if it's a cesarean. So at 6 weeks post-birth, that pay ends. We highlight that for that expectation because the majority of our female pilots are primary wage earners in the family. So we like to highlight that. And then the second is,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Say that again.
the majority of our female pilots are the primary wage earners in their family.
The majority of women pilots are the primary wage earners in their household.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a career for us. This isn't something that we choose to do for fun or as a hobby. All of us know, both male and female, it took us a long time to become Delta pilots. It took us a long time to go through training, to get hours, to go through regional flying, military flying, whatever it may be, to be able to get to this point to say, I'm a Delta pilot. And I'm proud of that, understanding that that is a career choice for us. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Maybe Carrie or Cassie have some input on that. I know they probably went through that too.
Well, let's go to Carrie. So all this time and energy and effort and money and experience and sacrifice to become a Delta pilot. And now you've arrived, right? You're in the big leagues, and now you want to have a family. And it looks like there's some barriers here. Tell me about
I think there is this assumption that if you are a female pilot, it's just something you do as a hobby, and that maybe you have a husband that is the primary wage earner, and that's not the case for most Delta pilots. And there are a lot of situations, like I went through a situation when I was going on maternity leave, and my husband was in danger of being furloughed. So there are situations where you do have to bring in that money because you may not have a partner, or you may not have a husband that is earning that money. That's one of the reasons why these benefits are so important, because if we can't support our family and have a good home life, then that translates into our work life.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, that question of insurance, it sounds like Delta will not cover you. That basically your United Healthcare coverage ends, and then they offer you almost like a Cobra
Yeah.
or some sort of supplemental insurance that isn't quite effective.
Yeah, and it gets tricky because that ends at 14 weeks post-delivery. So say, for example, I always like to put numbers because it's a little bit more impactful for people to actually understand. So if you're on like a gold HSA plan and your family monthly premium it would be $319. That's the current 2022 active insurance premium rates for that plan. Now you get to 14 weeks after you have a baby and you switch to inactive premiums, which is $2,255 a month. That's almost $2,300 a month. Now, keep in mind, at 6 weeks, all of your pay stopped. So now you're having to try to figure out how to financially provide. And now your insurance just went up more than a house payment of $2,300 a month. And either some of our women try and figure it out, or some of them go without insurance because they can't afford it.
That's what I
So
did.
Cassie, you have a 1-year-old?
So I had 2 babies at Delta. With my first, we found out about what Cobra costs. And Allison's right, it's more than a house payment. I can't do that. We don't live high on the hog, but I didn't have enough for a whole extra house payment. So we just opted to do no insurance with that first baby. And we were lucky, right? We had I think one doctor appointment the whole year, but that was lucky. And it was just a little unnerving all throughout the year. And I was looking for other options, even like Obamacare at the time and everything, but it was exactly the same. They're going to charge me that same house payment cost, even under Obamacare, to get insurance. But anyway, with this baby, I got really lucky because COVID was taking place. So they were giving the voluntary unpaid leave of absence. And so I did that instead of maternity leave. And that came with the benefit of insurance. So I'm like, oh, good, we don't have to go another year without insurance. But in September, I got a letter and it was like, this will end September 30th. And it was surprising. It was like, oh, they just took that away.
it's interesting, Cassie, when we went through that in COVID too, I always thought it interesting that they offered the voluntary leave of absences with not only active insurance premiums, but they paid for the active insurance premiums. And
Yeah, they did.
yeah, and they paid for those active insurance premiums during COVID in a time period where there was obviously a lot of financial hardship for the company, the industry, and the economy.
So
They could,
yeah,
if
when
they
we
can pay for
why
it during
not?
the hardest financial period, they could probably do it when times are great.
Case in point, right? There you go.
Let's take a break here. Alison Britton, the Pilot Family Matters Committee Chair, Carrie Nickell, also with Pilot Family Matters, and Cassie Nelson, a 737 FO from Salt Lake. All pilot moms, all Delta pilots. Back in 30 seconds. Stay with us.
You all appreciate it. Don't you know we love you, sweet dear mama? Place no one above you, sweet. You all appreciate it.
Engage Podcast wants to hear from you. Send us your questions through the MEC DART system at dart.alpa.org. You have questions, we want answers. You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots.
Let's talk about childcare, because maternity leave, it seems we take care of, okay, you're pregnant, now you have the kid, and then the child is born and you're on your own. And we touched on bonding leave, right? Now you've got a real human, but you're supposed to be gone. The nature of our industry, the nature of our career is when you're home, and that's great. But when you're gone, you're gone.
Childcare, just logistically, with having a husband who's also a pilot, is very challenging. So you have to find someone who is very flexible. Obviously, that's a very high cost, but as a pilot, you can't just use daycare, which would be a much cheaper option because we're not working a 9-to-5 job. So we have to find people that can come overnight sometimes, or we're delayed, or your child is sick and now you have to stay home. There's so many things that you have to just think about. And it almost feels like you're just praying it works because there's just so many variables.
Childcare is literally the toughest thing as a parent because you go through it at every single phase of the child's life, right? So then they get into grade school. Now you got to have pickup, and then you do half day kindergarten, and then you got to have a pickup for that. That's one of the really hardest things, I think, as a parent, especially in this job. But I do want to emphasize how much I love this job in the flexibility it gives me as a parent and to be home with my kids. And obviously, the more senior you get, the more flexibility you have with your schedule, and you can be home for a lot.
That was a good point with childcare. My wife's a Delta pilot, and she has teenage kids. I call them my fake kids. As real as they are, teenage kids, they can fend for themselves, at least feed themselves. But when you get rerouted at the end of the day and you expect to be home at a particular time, now you're up against that wall of, I need to get childcare. I need to have some sort of coverage. So that is difficult. That is difficult for everybody. I want to hear more of personal experiences and stories from each of you, but I want to bring this up as a controversial point, really. We have 14,000 pilots on the seniority list, and we have less than 800 female pilots. Why should maternity leave be a thing? We often hear that Delta management says the union hampers negotiated maternity leave benefits. And I feel that's inaccurate. Allison, I'd like you to speak to that in particular, but I feel like if the company came to the union, first of all, the company doesn't even have to come to the union to provide a benefit, right?
They do that, Ryan, with our personal leave of absence following maternity, which is a 12-month leave of absence post-birth. That's not codified in the contract.
That's a great example. And so I know this administration with ALPA is saying, please come to us, please give maternity benefits, please take care of our pilot moms, because it's going to help recruitment. It's going to help family life. It's going to help the male pilots that we have. Let's talk paternity leave. Let's talk all these things. It doesn't have to be negotiated. And frankly, in my opinion, it shouldn't be a negotiated thing. It should be a benefit given by a company that is in a position to do so.
I think it comes down to the volatility of the job, of what's going on in the job market right now, and the attraction and retention that's on the minds of Delta management, and trying to sustain that growth and working with whatever the increase on demand is going to happen for Delta. And the data showing retention and traction, that what companies need to do, but Delta chooses not to implement those necessary changes. For example, studies have shown that there are several driving factors that will affect attraction and retention in their workforce, which is positive culture, paid time off, i.e. maternity, paternity, healthcare benefits. Those are the three driving factors that will attract women and retain women. And I touched on it. The company could come and give those types of benefits. Recently, the flight attendants were just given boarding pay. Those types of things, the company can walk over to the union and say, hey, this is important for attraction and retention. And so we want to make sure that we come up with an agreement to codify in the contract to be able to do that and to bring more pilots into our workforce.
That was a big pro on my pros and cons list of moving on to a major airline. If we set the mark, I think other companies will try to meet that too.
Yeah, that's a great point. What improvements do we need in maternity and bonding leave? And I'll even tie in paternity leave.
We've addressed a lot of the challenges, or maybe made points, but the biggest one that I want to really hone in on again is the majority of our female pilots are the primary wage earners and insurance providers for their family. So when we get that idea and we understand what that is, then we can dive in further about what the needs are. So a paid leave for the logistical challenges of nursing. So 6 months paid leave would align with the American Academy of Pediatrics nursing recommendations for healthy child development. The CDC also supports that, and I know that Carrie and Cassie can attribute their pumping and nursing challenges. I've gone through my own too. That's a big thing. Adequate time to heal both physically and mentally to return to the flight deck. 6 weeks after I had a baby, I know I was not ready to get back into a flight deck. Both physically and mentally, I was not ready to get back into a flight deck. So understanding what our FAA requirements are, our job duties are, the training that we have to go through to be able to get back into that flight deck, putting value on the physical and emotional and mental side of us as women, our biological difference in healing to be able to get in the flight deck. So paid leave for that recovery obviously would support that. Also, again, some women will return to work earlier than desired for financial reasons. But there's always ways if they're worried, obviously, about training costs and how that is a financial standpoint there's so many different ways that we can maybe offer things. You can do part-time lines. So a woman might be able to come back from maternity and she could say, hey, I need this ease into transitioning back into work. So I will help out and I'll do a part-time line. If something like that is offered, you're going to get more women back in to the flight deck than if you don't offer anything like that. There's so many things. If we just put our heads together and brainstorm a little bit, that's another way to help, but also get a pilot back into the seat. I know that's something the company is struggling with right now. So just something so simple like that could help both the company and the pilot. Return to work pumping support. We talked about what PFMC is doing right now for lactation rooms in the CPOs and the training centers, milk shipping services, hands-free pumps that are covered by insurance. So when you're up in the flight deck, these hands-free pumps basically just go underneath your shirt without having to go to a room to actually express breast milk. It can be done while you're working. So those are just simple things that can be done right now to help.
Carrie, tell me about pumping. Let's go to the lowest common denominator, the single dude who has no clue. Why do women need to pump and why would you do it in the flight deck?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect most pilots to understand the importance of pumping. So I came back to work from my maternity, and that was the main thing I was nervous about. This is really uncomfortable. How do I tell people that I need to pump? And where do I pump? I didn't really have any guidance on that. And I felt like that I shouldn't really have to be worrying about this right now. I have a lot of other things that I need to be concentrating on. But luckily, I was able to contact Allison and get her support on that. When I came back into the simulator training, I just upfront told the instructor that I'm going to have to take maybe a 15-minute break after the briefing or after the first simulator. And they were all just so great about it. They totally understood. I don't think they probably haven't really been in that situation, but everyone was just completely understanding. But logistically, I was confused. I didn't know where to go or what to do or, how often I'm going to have to do it because pumping is actually a physical need. It's not just something that we want to do. It's very necessary for giving our child nutrition, but it's also a biological need that we have. It's like going to the bathroom. I can't go more than, let's say, 6 hours without pumping. So I ended up just pumping in the bathroom when I was in the simulator buildings because I couldn't figure out the codes to the pods and we didn't have a lot of time. And so I just had to get a manual pump that I didn't have to plug in and do it in the bathroom. And then luckily I was able to store that in the refrigerators there. But then going to the line is a whole nother issue. I tried to bid flights that I couldn't really fly longer than 4 hours because I obviously didn't know how I would be able to pump while I'm on duty in the airplane. I didn't really see that was feasible.
So the nasty labs weren't an option for you?
No, I didn't feel comfortable giving my child food from the lavatory.
That's so gross.
I have trouble even peeing in the lab sometimes.
I'd tell the captain I need to pump, so I'm going to shut the flight deck door and lock it. They probably haven't been in that situation, but everyone was completely understanding. There was only maybe one captain who seemed a little bit uncomfortable. Like he was like, I'm not really sure what the policy is on that. My main takeaway from that is if we could just educate the pilots about this, just educating them on what they need so that they're not just blindsided when a pilot tells them about it, and that it would really help women coming back to work feeling like I'm supported and that there's some type of policy for me that I don't just feel like I'm on my own, isolated, trying to figure it all out by myself and where to go and what to do and where to store the milk. And like Allison mentioned, it would be great if we had some type of milk storing program or milk shipping program because that takes one less stress away from you wondering, how am I going to store this milk? Because if I don't store it properly, my child won't be able to be fed on my next trip. There are definitely pros with people being very supportive, but then there's so much that we could improve in our program and just educating pilots.
Okay, that's a great feedback. Cassie, I want to go to you. This is like your interview question. Tell me about a time you had an uncomfortable moment in the cockpit.
Yes. Well, my uncomfortable pumping experience happened, and I was trying to navigate that whole pumping scene. And I remember we got delayed because we don't know when that's going to happen, right? I think we were in Chicago and messing with de-icing. A 4-hour flight turned into like a 6-hour flight, and now I'm hurting. It hurts. It's not just like, oh my gosh, I gotta pee. I'm gonna pee my pants. It's like it hurts, and there's no way to get it out except that one way. And all I had was this little express pump, which I'd never really had to use before, but I brought it for an emergency. And so I went into this yucky lab, and I was trying to do that, but as fast as possible. So you're not even really doing a full pump because you feel like you're inconveniencing people. And so you're doing about half of probably what you would, maybe even a quarter, just to take that pressure off so I didn't hurt anymore. And the thing about that too, your body adjusts or readjusts for supply and demand, basically. So if you're not pumping regularly, then your body thinks, oh, I don't need to make as much milk. And so it slows down. And so even after just that one day, it screwed up my production for a few days after that. It took a few days off to get it back regulated. And so my baby is like, where's the milk when I get home? And it wasn't a fun couple days, hard for me. And I feel like my baby was going hungry. I was hurting. I didn't know when I couldn't find times to pump. And obviously it's gotten better since that happened, but you still feel like it's an inconvenience. And so that's why I, prepped and would take the whole year off. And I know not everybody can do that. I was like, I don't even want to mess with it. I don't want to have to say in a simulator session, oh, I really hurt right now. I've got to go do this and put everybody on pause and then try to figure out how to get the milk home or pump it just to throw it away, which is just such a sad thing as a mom. It's a lot of work to pump all that. And then it's like this liquid gold and then you just have to throw it down the sink. And it's the saddest thing. I had to do that a couple times too.
That sounds sad. So what I'm gathering from each of you and what I've heard from other pilot moms is you feel supported by the people you fly with, by the flight attendants. There's some discomfort in where do I pump, some confusion, some stress, especially now with our schedules with reroutes and changes and delays and big sit times. So you need the support of the company, but also the pilot group and other pilots to take care of this physical need that has to happen, right? And we've all been on the other end of it, right? We all have moms, which is why this is the Mother's Day special. Make your mother proud. Engage the company, engage with our fellow employees and our fellow pilot moms to support them. I've seen lactation rooms at some of the bases, Seattle, where I just saw in the pilot lounge where the chief pilots sit, they have a mother's room, which is it's a closet, but it's a step in the right direction. And there's a comfortable seat with a nice, light, and there's a refrigerator in there. It's a locked door. I mean, it's an improvement. But on the sign, it says mother's room. And somebody wrote in pen underneath it, what do mothers do in here? And it's like, come on, guys. Come on, guys.
They don't know.
Let's support our Delta pilot moms. I want to circle back to Cassie's experience where Cassie, you just took a year off. You said, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to have the stress of this. I'm just taking a year off. It's unpaid. Perhaps we are in an industry where you can do that. So that's a benefit. However, we're in a pilot shortage and Delta needs you. Delta wants you back on the line as a productive pilot. And so to look at it from a dollars and cents or a logistical thing, if they can support the pilot moms, they're going to get the cogs back in the wheel, so to speak, faster, right? That you're going to get back, feel more comfortable to get back into training, back in the cockpit to participate sooner. And so from a logistical standpoint, Delta management, you're losing your people because your policies are not quite up to snuff.
It's true. If I would have had more options, that would have been so helpful. Maybe the part-time schedule or something that you can ease back into it. There are different options where I probably would have come back sooner. But again, I just didn't want to deal with the stress of it.
If there was like a 6-month paid leave post-birth to follow the pediatrics nursing recommendations, then followed up into a part-time line for the remaining 6 months to then get you at that 12 months post-birth, I would imagine that would drive a lot of women to come back at 6 months.
That would have been perfect for me. I would have loved that. That'd be great.
Awesome. I think those are great ideas that would be supported as well. We talked about what improvements do we need, but what are some examples of other corporate policies? The federal government gives some paid maternity leave to its employees. I looked in the Fortune 100, of all the companies in the Fortune 100, and Delta loves to bring that up. The minimum was 22 weeks of paid leave. The average was about 26 weeks. So 6 months of paid maternity leave with some follow-on benefits that depended on company. I know Starbucks, Amazon have come out publicly in their recruitment process just to get good employees and good people for that longevity, for that retention. They've increased wages, they've increased benefits across the board, but maternity leave has been the focal point for those two companies. So what do we need? What are you seeing?
Glad you brought this up because you talked about Delta management and some things that they're trying to do and trying to talk about, but yet behind the scenes, they're falling a little bit short. Delta started the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force for Flight Ops in 2019, and that was started to foster this culture and where we all feel valued and respected. So that was an initiative to get things moving. And then Ed Bastian in just Q1 Q&A section talked about we are continuing to invest in the physical, emotional, and financial well-being of our people while prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion at all levels of the company. So when our leader is stating those things publicly, that he's willing to invest in the physical, emotional, and financial well-being of all their people, every employee at Delta, including the female pilots, expect there to be some of those financial things that go along with it. Delta's falling short when it comes to the female pilots on that. And like you had said, organizations, they're realizing that. So Delta is saying it, but yet these other Fortune 100 companies are realizing that and putting the money where their mouth is. So like you said, the one that I noticed, Netflix, Sensi, they offer 52 weeks of paid maternity leave. That's a full year. And companies may not have the financial backing of Fortune 100 companies, but they're still offering those things. Amazon, Twitter, Microsoft, your IT companies are offering 20, 26 weeks paid maternity leave because they understand the value and they read the studies of what that can do. So like the American Psychological Association has put out studies and articles that show giving that paid time off will decrease the risk of hospitalization for women. Women will have better mental health, they'll have better self-esteem, and the list goes on and on. The studies are there. There just needs to be action that goes along with it.
Thanks for that. And in terms of the average Delta pilot career, right? This is a 20, 25, 30-year career.
That's something this is just such a small amount of time in our career. By the end, I'll be at Delta for 35 years. And this is just a snippet in that time. And it's a time that is very important for the child. Not only the mother, but it's our duty to be there for our children as a society and as a company as well. The importance of being with that child, especially the first year and the first 2 years, that is of grave importance. The maternity leave could definitely be improved, but also the paternity leave and the importance of seeing those benefits for the men as well. The men also need to be there to bond with that child and to support the family because it's just such an important part of the child's life and part of your family life.
And that's my follow-up question to all three of you is what can we do to support you?
Ryan, the biggest thing is obviously listening to this to be educated in what our female pilots go through, not necessarily from a pumping perspective, but from the entire maternity process and the perspective of the financial struggles, the physical struggles, the mental struggles. And then on the pumping side of it, like Cassie and Carrie have said, that we just need maybe some empathy and understanding of what we go through when we return to work And having a little bit of grace goes a long way when our pilots just to feel uncomfortable. So you don't feel rushed. So you don't feel like you got to hurry up and make sure that this operation is going and moving when you've got something that you physically need to do just to provide for your child their food. That's their food source. So a little bit of grace goes a long way. And having the pilots being educated is a big thing. Really advocating with the union, standing together in unity as a pilot group in advocating for policy changes of all the things that we've discussed today in those improvements to be able to support our female pilots on the maternity perspective.
Alison Britton, Carrie Nickell, and Cassie Nelson, all pilot moms, all Delta pilots, empathy, understanding, and grace. That's what we need. Thank you all for being here. Alison, what you do for the Pilot Family Matters Committee, PFMC.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ryan.
I'll say to all our pilot moms, my wife, Katie, included, I have the utmost respect and admiration for her. She's been a mom across the board, teenage kids. So happy Mother's Day, Katie. Happy Mother's Day to each of you. Alison, Carrie, Cassie, thanks so much for being here. Happy Mother's Day, everybody.
Thank you.
This has been Engaged, the podcast for Delta pilots. Thanks for listening. My name is Ryan Argenta. Stay safe and keep the rubber on the road.
You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform, and receive notifications when a new episode is available.